Hey, what's going on out there, YouTube? I know my voice sounds a little raspy. It's because, like I said in the video before, that I do have the flu. I've been pretty sick. Last week, shoot, I couldn't do much of anything, but this week it was even worse. And so it got to the point that I was like, my body was aching, chills and stuff, and so I was like, man, I can't record anything. So without further ado, I'll finally be able to do the review for y'all of this awesome little trilogy box set, the Blu-ray version of the amazing, well, not the amazing, but the Spider-Man trilogy by Sam Raimi, starring Toby Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Alfred Molina, Thomas Church, who else? Topher Grace, and who's the villain for the first one? How can I forget his name? Oh my gosh. No, I'm not gonna forget his name. William Dafoe. But yeah, I wanted to go through my review of that one for y'all. Got a lot of notes, especially for the third one. Oh my gosh. But I'll probably be able to freehand the first and the second one for y'all. So off the gate, I don't know if I'll talk about special features last. I'll talk about them first. Well, I guess I'll talk about the movie first. So I'm not gonna dissect it how I normally do with the visuals and all that. I'm just gonna go to the core of what Spider-Man was, as far as how it defined the superhero genre in and of itself. Before there was a Batman Begins, before the transfer between the original Batman and the original Christopher Reeve Superman, like this was the deal breaker. But another small history about this one, the initial one, and I do have the DVDs for it as well. When it first came out, right after September 11th, matter of fact, the movie was supposed to release out September 11th. There was a teaser trailer that Spider-Man was running, and he was trying to catch some bank robbers. Bank robbers, they were in a helicopter, and when they were in the helicopter, he caught them in the web, and there was a huge web that cast out two buildings. It was the trade towers, and they had to remove that because it was too not unsympathetic, but it was too hard for Americans to even like accept at that time. And so what happened was they ended up removing that, but then that same next year they released out Spider-Man, and everybody was like, man, this is gonna be too much, and all this kind of controversy behind it. But by the time it came out, it was such a heartfelt movie to the core that people, they looked at it, they said, man, this was funny, man, this was action-packed, man, this was an amazing experience, and it's what people needed. And in all honesty, like, if you look at the third Spider-Man movie with Sam Raimi, there's a lot of shots for him being right in front of the American flag. And that plot line straight from the first one. Like, when you think of Spider-Man now, you don't think of the World Trade Center being a year right after that or before. You think about like just the amazing time that you had during that time. I can still remember going to the movie theaters and being so excited. I went and saw that so many times. But for me, this one, of course, the visuals, when it came transferred over to the Blu-ray set, it looked really awesome because I had it on DVD before, and looking at it on Blu-ray, like, it just brought me back. It was so awesome to see. And I have a 3D TV, so I can actually transfer and up-convert it to 3D, but it's not needed because this is such a nostalgic kind of craft in and of how Sam Raimi even designed it, because the Toby Maguire character in this one, he's brought from the ground up. I mean, you see him a geek, you see him a science nerd, you see him just an innocent bystander in and of himself, and this getting bit off of looking at this amazing girl that he is fantasizing about and has loved for a long amount of time that you don't even realize. But the way that they do it so smoothly is that you don't know anything about Peter until everything happens. So you don't know that when he's going to the museum and they're looking at the telescope, he's talking about like, man, he's got interest in spiders. You don't know that when he's trying to run to try to actually go and get his tail on the bus, that like he's got this fixation for this girl. It comes as the moment happens versus like you being told tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat. And so it's a really good introduction story to me, more so than they've had in a lot of the other superhero origin stories. And so, I mean, of course, it's like now that's just kind of the standard. I mean, I think Batman Begins, it redefined it to a degree, but the amount of action in Spider-Man, like I went back and I looked at it, I was like, man, CG back then, 2002, that was some serious CG. When he was fighting the Green Goblin out in the courtyard, when Mary Jane had gotten knocked out or got hurt. No, Harry got knocked out, and then Mary Jane was hurt because the Goblin was trying to attack her, and Peter was just jumping off of the different what was it? It was hot air balloons, and he was jumping and trying to get to it. It was a great transfer from CG to great like stunt work, and I could really appreciate it. Even looking at it now, like I really enjoyed how they actually did that. And by the time you see the end of Source, like you go through the whole revelation of the fact that Peter is now finding this more of a burden, and the fact that now that you see that even Mary Jane, she's got her own little story going on. Before, there was a lot of drama, and between the third one with the love triangle and all this kind of stuff, it was a central core characters. It was Harry, Peter, and it was Mary Jane. And Harry and Peter, they've got their own dynamics. Like Harry already had a lot of envious nature to him because of being a byproduct of his dad, and then Peter didn't know Harry's dad beforehand. Like he just started meeting after Uncle Ben died. Spoiler, after Uncle Ben died, then that was when he gravitated towards learning more about Harry's father, and Harry's father seeing like all the different things in him that he wanted in his own son. And then Peter just kind of lost. Like when he went into the fight with the guy that killed Uncle Ben's, that he thought that killed Uncle Ben, I thought, even when I was little, I was like, did he kill him? You know, and I mean, I can appreciate a lot more now going back and looking at it all the way through and get to the third one. I mean, he didn't care. It wasn't a matter that if he tried to, he didn't care if he lived or died. And so I thought that was really interesting to see, like, there's a glimpse of like the darkness that is potential within Peter, you know. And I don't know, it was just a classic. The first one is a classic to me. I love the special features because all the special features from the first one, my 2-disc box set that I still have to this day, they're all in the Blu-ray. I mean, everything from the TV spots to the trailers to the music videos. I mean, they've got, what was it? The music video by Train, and then the music video by Nickelback, Hero. And I mean, all the special features are there, and I really like that. I mean, it's not anything new though. I'll say that they didn't go back and have Sam Raimi go and revisit everything and talk about this or that. It's just the same old stuff that you got when you got the special edition stuff. So now I'm gonna go into, well, I'll give my review for the first one, the Blu-ray set. I'll give that one, just because I love all the special features in it, a 9.0. So Spider-Man 2 now. Spider-Man 2 was one of my favorite superhero movies, period. I mean, from the whole backstory between after Peter decided that he did not want to be with Mary Jane, and he wanted to try to stay away from her because he knew that eventually the enemies that he had would try to attack her. He was like, you know, this is just my burden, my gift, my curse. Who had my Spider-Man? Okay, well, everything banks off of that point, because now MJ, even though she had an abusive dad, even though she had not successful work career, now she is an up-and-coming actress and actually doing the things that Peter had told her that she was capable of doing in the first one. And she had displayed that she loved Peter, but he rejected her. And so now she's her own woman, and Peter is trying to make it. He doesn't have any money, and it's very interesting because I didn't think about it, but in the first one, I mean, in the first, Uncle Ben was talking about that he didn't have that, he didn't have a job at that point. He got let go anyway. And then Aunt May had not been working either. So I was like, man, I didn't think about it. She got an income. And so now when you look at the second one, like her house is being foreclosed, and Peter doesn't have anywhere that he's really technically working because he's being put through school. I don't know how he's putting himself through school. And at the same time, he's working with Daily Bugle and he's getting shortchanged. So, I mean, it's just an interesting it's interesting dynamic that's actually going on with Peter and his evolution of being Spider-Man, because now, instead of it being more so his gift and his curse, he's seeing it more as his curse, because now he's rejected the woman that he loves. Now he's got all this guilt behind thinking that he's responsible for Uncle Ben's death. And at the same time, like, he's seeing his Aunt May suffer. He's seeing that everybody's passing him by. He feels like he's an empty seed or empty shell, whatever he said. But then you got entered in an interesting new character that, no, two actually. Dr. Kurt Connors, which I can't remember the person that plays it. He does a good job as Kurt Connors to me. And then you've also got Alfred Molina that's playing Dr. Octopus. And to me, he's the most likable villain that I've seen, because you see that it's not just him making this conscious decision. Like, he's being controlled and he's being manipulated mentally and emotionally. And I mean, then he also had a great wife that was a really good it was a really good example for Peter of seeing what a good relationship would look like. And by the end of it, I mean, shoot, it's just, it go tit for tat as far as emotionally, between Mary Jane and Peter. And then, I can't talk about it now because I got another video that I'm gonna be doing about people you would not recognize. Okay, the guy that plays John Jameson's son, I forgot his name, but oh gosh, I'll talk about another video. He's another star that I didn't see for the last one. At any rate, but he was interesting role as being Mary Jane's love interest. No, better yet, like her fiance. And so it was an amazing ride. I mean, from start to finish, I was entertained. It was funny. Sometimes it was a little too drawn out as far as like the campus funny stuff. But I mean, there was some stuff like when Peter was trying to get his powers back, because he had lost his powers at a certain point, because mentally, emotionally, he did not want to be Spider-Man anymore. It's interesting how he could just turn it off like that. It's really cool. I like how they did that on the mental level. But when he was jumping and he fell and he swung, he hit the building, and then he hit his back on the car, and then he tried to walk. He's like, my back, and he touched the car and the alarm went off. That's just classic comedy. I'll never forget a moment like that, you know. In the theaters, I cut out every single time looking at that. It's like when the Hulk took Loki and took him by the legs. Pewter God. It's like one of those kind of epic moments, you know. But I mean, there was so much action in the second one that was just like, it was unraveled. I mean, the first one's action was good, and it was authentic, and it was different, and it was more emotionally driven. But this one, it just camped off of that, because you got everything that happened from the first one with Harry and him blaming Spider-Man, and then him finding out what's going on with Peter. And then you got the emotional turmoil that's happened between Mary Jane and Peter. And then you got Spider-Man losing his powers. And so now, how is he going to defend the city? It's just, it was epic. And I mean, by the time you see Peter get up and fight, and it's just, oh, it was so epic. I mean, the Blu-ray quality, it was on point. And another thing, so back when I had the original box set, and then I also had gotten the 2.1. So I found out that this one actually has the 2.1. So that means that you got the first regular edition, and you got the 2.1 edition, which is really cool, because I mean, you got all the features for everything. But anyway, this is one of my favorite superhero movies, and I mean, special features for this one, it didn't have as many as I thought it would, to me, but I love the movie and I love the visuals for it. So I'll definitely give the movie and the look for it a 9.5, most definitely. I'm gonna try to get into now the third one, which a lot of people would debate is the worst one. I'm not gonna try to reinforce that it's not, but I'm gonna talk about what happened when it made this go so wrong. Because at the end of the second one, you got Peter, you got his girl, you got Harry that's lining up to be the Green Goblin, you got everything just kind of set up in a scope that this should have been epic. I mean, honestly, I really wanted Venom to be in it, but looking back, that was a childish want, you know? It really should have been the way that Sam Raimi wanted it to be. And I'm gonna spoil this for y'all. Sam Raimi, he did not want Venom to be in the third one. He wanted it to be in the fourth one, potentially the fifth one, depending on how they did it. It was not his interest to put in. His main interest, his favorite, was Sandman. See, the real secret, like I said, about what happened with the transition of going into Spider-Man 3 is that when Sam Raimi was approached by Sony about the creation of the third one, he had said that he had big plans for the fourth one, okay? And he knew that he didn't want to put too much into the third one. This is Sam Raimi's words. A lot of people think it's like Sam Raimi had this idea of just putting everything and shifting it and all these villains and stuff like that, adding Sandman, adding Green Goblin, adding Venom into it. Why do all that? That's not what he wanted to do. His main thought was to make sure he finished up Harry's storyline, which everything had built up to that point, and then the introduction of something that was going to jeopardize Peter Parker's past. And if you look at Spider-Man 2 and you look at the behind the scenes, he'll go into detail about that. His emphasis on how he wanted to do that. I mean, at the time when I was younger, I was just like, man, I didn't want that, you know. But when he had told Sony, he was like, look, I'm not going to be able to introduce this character such as Venom into the fold right now. And they said, well, we need to have that boost. Everybody loves Venom. We need him added into it. And so he's like, okay, well, I'll listen to the fans. If that's what they want, then I'll do that, you know. And so he put it in there. Of course, you see the finished product. Now, I'm going to go into my rebuttal of everything later, but I have to tell you the rest of the story. The rest of the story goes that he was working on the fourth one. They were working on it. They had Dunst, they had Maguire, they had Sam Raimi, they had Danny Elfman, who is the most amazing composer. His soundtrack is amazing. All of them, I mean, I love the Batmans, of course. Danny Elfman, he works close with Tim Burton. At any rate, they were working on it and they were building up the storyline straight up for the Lizard. And then they were going to go into a story arc that was going to follow up with Venom along with Carnage. And he was like, look, this is going to be the Lizard. This is how I want it and stuff like that. Kurt Connors has already been introduced in a certain subtle kind of way so he can get away with it. And what happened was Sony was like, you need to finish it at this deadline, you know, just like how they want to have their games and their movies done the same exact time. They want to have everything done in a certain amount of time, and that doesn't work like that. If you don't perfect the craft, you want to do it the right way, and that's not what they wanted. And so he said, well, look, I'm gonna need a lot more time than that. I'm gonna need at least this amount of time. They said, well, scrap it, no more. Like, they were like, well, what do you mean by that? And they got rid of Sam Raimi. And so when they did that, Tobey Maguire said, I can't do it without him. He's the person that does this. And so, of course, Tobey Maguire's not in there. And then, of course, Kirsten Dunst is out. And then, of course, then they just threw out the entire idea. And then comes follow suit with this. Now, I love this. I love Andrew Garfield. He does a great rendition of the comic book version of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Like, dare I say, even better than Toby. But the real truth about it is that Sony kicked Sam Raimi out and kicked Tobey Maguire out at the same exact time. They did not want to just like end it all together like that. A lot of people don't know that. I'm be the first one to be honest with you about it. So kicking into the third one, like I said, I done a whole run through with it. I really feel like the beginning it started off so well. It started off so well, y'all. Y'all just don't know, because kicked off and you see Peter, right? And he's settled into his own. He's got the love of his life. And I mean, they're going through their growing pains. They hadn't even started really yet, but you start seeing certain subtle things, like Peter becoming a little bit arrogant because now everybody adores Spider-Man. Everybody accepts Spider-Man, and he's got everything put together, and he's coming into his own. And then you got Mary Jane that now she's on the opposite end of that spectrum, where now her career is taking a back burner to Spider-Man, and so she's becoming envious and jealous of Peter. And then of course you got Harry, which is a more core character. It's like it was rushed a little bit as far as the process of becoming the Goblin, but when it started, and you see the beginning sequence, because it was like Peter was just chilling with Mary Jane on the web, and they were looking at the stars and stuff like that, and everything was so cool. And then all of a sudden, Peter just gets attacked. And like he was going, I can't remember if he was coming from Aunt May's house, because he had just got the ring from Aunt May, and he was gonna propose to Mary Jane. And so he's going back, all of a sudden he gets attacked, and it's just so epic, because it's not him in the suit, it's him in a suit and fighting like off the roofs, and like you don't know what's gonna happen, because like Harry is out for blood, and it's just an epic confrontation. It's very emotional. And it was just the perfect start to it. And even I will say that when the symbiote does come down and hits, it was like that was a really subtle turn. Now, when I did some research, I looked back at the behind the scenes for this one, and some of the producers, not Sam Raimi, not Avia Reed, but somebody else, it was a female, she had said that they didn't want to spend a lot of time with the Venom origins. Instead, they wanted to kind of come down, I guess, random, instead of going with John Jameson's son being the astronaut that he was, and then going from that story arc and bringing it in. So I was like, why would they do that? Why, if you're going to introduce Jameson's son in the second one, why not have a little bit of time and go through the astronaut part? Did you lose the budget? I don't know, but all they had to do was just talk about what happened when he was going. They didn't have to go into him being the Wolfman. They could have just been him being an astronaut, and some substance hit, and then when he came back down, it was brought down with him. At any rate, that was a subtle thing that they did. They introduced the symbiote that way, and then it attached itself to Peter's bike, and then eventually ended up in his room. The way the symbiote moved and everything like that was really good CG animation. I really appreciated that. It's just I was trying to figure out. I'm sitting there looking at this movie, and I was like, what point did there was their turning point, you know? And I think it was around the time where they had, what happened? Peter was trying to encourage Mary Jane about the critics, because the critics were giving her a bad review. And then she had responded, Mary Jane responded to something very weird and strange. She said, it's not about you. It's about me. It's about my career, or something like that. And then it was like, okay, well, was that the issue, you know? But then I thought back, oh no, Mary Jane, she's all the victim of a childhood that was very emotionally abusive, and she doesn't really have a lot of self-esteem internally. She just goes through the emotions of what happens, and so she tries to find the people that are closest to her to try to boost her up, you know. And I think that's where that came from. It's just really, I think it's more growing pains more than anything with their relationship, because they filling out who and what they really are to each other, and at the same time the honest part about themselves are kind of coming out, because now they're together officially. And I mean, Peter was he wasn't giving her much attention as he needed to, because he was going through his own boastful kind of ordeal and stuff. But I'm trying to think of what point that I found out that there was a turn and it didn't need to happen. Try to understand how I feel. Reports coming, needed help. May said put aside. Oh, there was an interesting part that I did read, or didn't know. It's just from my notes. When Spider-Man was going out, and he came back and he was talking to Aunt May, and she was talking about like marriage, and that man has to put his wife before himself, you know. And I don't think Peter really understood that concept, but by the end of the movie, he really did get the gravity of, sometimes it really does mean like sacrificing the fold of what you're dealing with to try to be there for them, to cater for them, even when the hard times come, you know. And I thought that was done very well. The issue was, this is the real issue, is that when Sandman is introduced, and Thomas Church does an amazing job. I loved his character. I loved that his character was brought into the fold randomly, and then like you see him and you get an introduction to his family, and it's brought with such care. I felt like Sam Raimi has such love for this character, and it shows and exemplifies on the screen when he did it. And so I looked at it and I was like, man, this is such an interesting character. He's interesting in plotline. I was like, he doesn't feel like the bad guy. He feels like he just misunderstood and something's wrong. Something happened, you know. And then they found out that he was the one that killed Uncle Ben. And then that brings a whole nother tie to Peter, that the darkness that he had left before. Like I told y'all before when I was talking about it, that he had let the other person just kind of fall and die. He didn't really care if he lived that. Now he got another person. Now that's a reason for him to go in anger. And then the bad thing was that his first confrontation with Sandman, technically Peter lost. And so he let him go again. And so it was like it played on all the emotional things that happened with Peter. And then at that point, that was when all the things happened with his downfall with Mary Jane and their interaction, and of course now Harry is got amnesia, so he doesn't remember everything, but then Peter still has all that guilt. And so eventually when he's trying to look for Sandman, the costume comes over him. Okay, that's fine. That's all that's actually pretty fine. And even the relationship with Sandman, now that's perfect. But the moment that the thing messes up, to me, is the timing in when Peter rips off the symbiote and then they go ahead and change it straight to being Venom. You got two characters that shouldn't have been there, basically. You got Gwen Stacy, and then you got Topher Grace playing Eddie Brock. And I mean, Topher Grace and Bryce Howard, they're awesome actors. Both of them are really equally good actors, but they had no reason to be there. Neither did Captain Stacy. They shouldn't have been there. If they would have erased them, if they would have erased these characters, period, saved them for the next movie, it would have been perfect. Because what would have happened, I'm going to show you, this is the movie that I would have painted in my head. You got, at the point that Peter goes, and he goes through the relationship issues, and then he gets the symbiote over him, and he tries to go and kill Sandman. He couldn't kill Sandman, right? And then after that point, now you got, the movie still is progressing at this point. You still got Harry now that he goes and has this interaction with Mary Jane. They flirt and something happens, and then he goes and he turns back into the Goblin. He goes and on the attack against Peter. After Peter is like, I can't use the costume anymore, it's changing me. He finds out that Mary Jane may be like liking Harry and cheating on him, and then he puts it on for real. And then this ultimate confrontation between the Goblin, Harry, and Peter. Now Peter is completely just all evil out, you know. At that point when they start their fight, and then he throws the orb back and it explodes in Harry's face, and you don't see Harry for a while. You don't know if he lived or died. Imagine instead if Harry was in a stasis where he had to heal for a long period of time, and Peter was left like he normally is, but now he's completely consumed by the symbiote. Instead of him going to the shop and going and getting new clothes and going and doing this, what if the symbiote itself started making an attire for him? What if the symbiote itself started having him going and he's going to sleep thinking he's okay, and then he's actually going and fighting crime and actually killing people? Or what if it was like he was going and interacting with other females and he didn't know? I feel like they consciously had him doing stuff that was so stupid and idiotic that Peter Parker wouldn't do. Instead, they should have had a whole different alter ego. Like when you think of Family Matters, you think of Steve Urkel, you think of Stefan, those are two different people. It's not Steve Urkel acting cool, it's a whole different person, and that's what they should have changed. And the fact that by the time of it he couldn't rip it off, then that should have been a notion that was something that was consuming him. And even funnier, what would have been even better is that if he would have never known that the costume would change. There was a trailer, and there was a picture of Spider-Man going and climbing up a wall, and he's on a building. In the building, it was like reflection, and so the reflector it showed him in the black suit, granted, but what he saw was he was still in his same costume. What if Peter didn't know? I mean, that would be amazing. That at first he started pulling off and turning off, and he's thinking he's pulling off. What if subconsciously his mind would just been messed up, you know? And then you still go and you have the confrontation with Sandman. Now, they could have made Sandman more of a threat. I promise you they could have. And that would have been the full resolve. And then you got the Goblin, or you got Harry come back, and maybe he instead doesn't go and just accept what Bernard says, which Bernard pissed me off. Bernard could have told Harry a long time ago, your father was the one that killed himself and tried to kill Spider-Man. You could have told him. You could have saved this man half of his face. At any rate, but imagine if he didn't listen to Bernard. He went on trying to attack Peter. And Peter was going and fighting Sandman, and Sandman had Mary Jane. Instead of this whole Gwen Stacy mess, instead of the Topher Grace mess, imagine that was still happening with the black suit. And eventually something happens where maybe like Harry sacrificed himself for Peter. And Peter gets to a point that he realizes there's something wrong about himself because he doesn't feel sympathy for his own best friend dying. And eventually Sandman goes and confesses what's really happening with that whole relationship and what really happened. And then that breaks him down to the point, man, he's got to get rid of the suit. And even Mary Jane says, I can't be with you because of what's going on. You know, and then leave at the very end. The very end. They don't even have to show the person who it was. They could go and maybe do like a little spoof of a person that they were thinking about that was Eddie Brock, that's been taking these pictures, that's been trying to compete with Peter for all this time. And then at that point, when he's trying to rip everything off, you see that there's a person that's been following him this whole entire time, that's been so consumed and obsessed with him. And then the stuff starts to fall, and you hear somebody just yell out, and then you see the symbiote turn into Venom at the end of the movie. That would have been the perfect end to Spider-Man 3. But no, they didn't do any of that. They had Toby Maguire acting the fool, dancing around. They had Gwen Stacy introduced, which was a very nice character, very beautiful girl, but she was just like out of place, and it was like a competition between her and Mary Jane. And I was like, why was Mary Jane, when the time came that Harry set Peter up and told Mary Jane, you better tell him that I cheated on you with him, and that if you don't, I'm gonna kill him. Like, she knows he's Spider-Man. Why are you gonna sit there and tell him, like make him convince him? Okay, grant that. Okay, you convinced him. You could go back and tell him the truth. Why would you not? Why would you not go back and tell him the truth? That made no sense. And so by the end of it, you got Topher Grace's character, that's kind of this wimpy kind of guy. He's definitely not a built Eddie Brock that we know. It's decent Venom. But I don't have anything to compare it off of. And by the end of it, it's like he kind of kills Harry, and then, I mean, Sandman's character, I still love the way they ended his character, but then it's like Peter pulled Eddie out of Venom, and then he threw a bomb at the symbiote, and it just exploded, and that was supposed to be both of them dead. It didn't make any sense. And I mean, like I said, I think that the turning point was the introduction of Topher Grace's character, Eddie Brock, and Bryce Howard's character, Gwen Stacy. They did not need to be in there. If they were not in there, that picture that I just painted for y'all is what it could have been. That's what it could have been. At any rate, that's not what we got, because what could have been the fourth one could have been Venom. It could have been like Venom reproduced itself into Carnage. Cletus Cassidy could have been introduced. It could have been so much, but hey, I say love you. Going into the visuals for it, is really good looking. Special features, like I said, I've mentioned some of them. I really highly recommend this. Anybody that was a fan of any of the Sam Raimi movies, period, you're gonna really enjoy this. And I mean, it's really good. I mean, for long term, for family usage. But yeah, I mean, I give that movie 7.5 out of 10. But the way the visuals are and everything, the grand scope of everything, this box set in of itself is a must buy for me. I definitely give it a 9.0 all around. I thought that the second movie didn't have enough special features in it, but then I might have missed out some stuff. Anyway, this concludes my review of the Spider-Man Trilogy by Sam Raimi. Look for me to do a review possibly on the Amazing Spider-Man this weekend. I'm going to try to look at the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Any of y'all that love the Amazing Spider-Man 2, please leave your comments at the bottom. This is SCL0220 signing out. Later, y'all.